Welcome to the October the 13th, 1992 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, Texas. And we are so excited today. And to give you a little preview of what may be happening to us on the set today, as we begin to celebrate the birthday of the fire department, its 75th year, we are very exciting. We're going to feature some very important people that have been associated with the fire department for several years. This is our history tape number 180, and we're very excited to bring, first of all, I would say in ranking order, of an ex-fire chief, not really an ex-fire chief because he's still into it, Mr. J.C. Swadley, Jr. Welcome to the set, Mr. Swadley, sir.
Thank you.
Chief, we're glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Ruth.
Wonderful. And next we have Mr. L.R. Squat Cannon, a very important person to us, and we want to welcome you to the set today. Squat, may we call you Squat on our show?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. That's great. And finally, a young man that has been associated almost by osmosis, as I have, with the fire department, but his dad was very important in it, Mr. Charles Billy Powers. Welcome to the set again.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yes. I'm so excited about having you three young men here with us today because we want to set the stage for our interview. About a year ago, a very wonderful opportunity came to your speaker. I received a call from Dallas from a Mr. Bill Barrett, who is a philanthropic person in the city of Dallas with the Coors distributorship at Willowbrook, and he said, Ruthie Jackson, I have something for you. I want to give you a fire truck. And I thought of all of the gifts I had ever received, this was probably the most unique, and I immediately knew who to call. Volunteers of the fire department and the chief at that time, Chief Robertson, and Mr. J.C. Swadley and Mr. Squat Cannon performed a miracle. They went to Willowbrook and they picked up a wonderful old fire truck, and we're going to talk about that today. Now, before we begin on the fire truck, we have to know just a little bit about you gentlemen that are with us. And I'm not going to start with J.C. the chief because we know that he'll talk forever. But let's start with Mr. Billy Powers. Billy, would you tell us how you're interested in the fire department, the volunteers, and your association with your dad, and why you have developed such an interest in fire?
Well, I suppose that you're raised in it, and just like J.C. is, I suppose. My father joined the fire department about the same time that J.C. did, and so as a youth, that's all I knew. Fire department was the center of our activity.
Would you give us his full name, please?
It was Thomas Daniel Powers, Jr., and he was until he died in 1960, he would always been a volunteer fire department for Grand Prairie, and I was the mascot following Carl Page Swadley, J.C.'s brother. So I was the mascot for several years. And then I became a member of the volunteer fire department 1950 to 1956, and I have the reputation of being the most untrained volunteer they ever had, probably. So that's my reputation for the fire department. And of course I had some connection with the fire department for the city too.
All right, because you did serve as a city council member in the past. Would you like to name your magic years you served on the council, and I believe also as Mayor Pro Tem? 1953,
1955, and I think I was sort of the communication arm for the fire department, or for the council to Chief Swadley.
That's wonderful. And you have deserted Grand Prairie and moved to Dallas, which is understandable. But we're going to proselyte you back maybe one of these days. But we want to thank you for being here today, and we know we're going to talk with you some more about some of the good stuff that's coming down the pike. All right, now let's get to Squat Cannon. Mr. L.R. Cannon, and I guess we could tell him that it's Lindell, and that's all right, isn't it? Okay, would you tell us a little bit about you? Name your family, name your wife that talked you into coming on this show when you didn't want to come on it. She's precious for doing that because we needed you to help us document. And tell us about your career, what brought you to Grand Prairie, the year you came here, and just a little history of Squat Cannon and the fire department.
Well, my wife, Jo, Ellen, and I were up here several years before I came through in a truck, driving a truck, and I stopped and asked Chief Swadley where an address was I was looking for, and he told me, and of course I had to mention that I was on the New Boston Fire Department, and asked him if they ever needed any paid firemen, you know, and he said, well, give me your name, address, and I'll send you a card every time I need one. And so he sent me one, and I came up, took the test, and got on, and very glad that I did.
What magic year was that you went to work for the fire department as a paid fireman?
December the 1st, 1958.
In 1958, and did we have a multiplicity of fire stations then, or only one? And do you remember anything about that first day you came into Grand Prairie?
Well, I had to wait a little while to get on because they was building fire station number 3.
I see.
6 of us was hired to open it.
Okay.
So
That was an
Then,
exciting time of Grand Prairie, wasn't it?
it sure was. And
All
I
right.
had 2 boys then, Ray and Perry, and since then I've had a daughter, Doris Harris.
All right.
And, her husband's a school teacher, and Ray's wife is a school teacher.
All right, give us Doris's husband's name.
Phil Harris.
Okay.
And Deborah Cannon is Ray's wife's. And they're both school teachers out at South, and very proud of them.
That's great. All right, now working with the fire department all these many years, you started out just as a fireman, and then what year did you retire, and what was your rank when you retired?
I retired in 85, January the 3rd, and at the rank of lieutenant.
All right. And during all of those years, I know it was exciting to see the progression of the fire engines and the different equipment that came down the pike, wasn't it?
Sure was.
All right. Of all of the fire engines that you worked with, or the fire stations where you worked, what was your most favorite of all shift?
Well, it was tank trucks.
All right.
And, those
What-
tank trucks, you get to fire on the water immediately and then let the engines come in and back you up. And
I see.
if it's a real large fire, they put the fire out, but the tank truck can put it out a lot quicker if it's there on time.
Did you ever serve any time at the main fire station, which is located now on Main Street, the new Highway 180?
Yes, ma'am. I spent several years there.
All right, going in under J.C. Swadley Jr., can you name some of your other fire chiefs that you've served under?
Bobby Langford and James Robertson.
Okay. You made it all the way down the line then. That's wonderful. We're going to get back with you in a few minutes and maybe let you exhort the young people that may be watching our show about the excitement of being a fireman and how good it is to be a public servant. But now let's get down to J.C. J.C. Swadley Jr., a very important young man that can bring us probably more history than we have time for. But J.C., let's start out with some of the old pictures that we have here. And we're going to show and tell while you talk. Why don't you do that? Because we're going to start out with the first one that you gave to us, and let's hold that one up. And Squat, would you get that focused in a little higher so that it does not glare when our camera picks that up?
Now.
All right. Now tell us about that one, J.C.
Now, Miss Jackson, this is a 1939 Ford fire truck that my dad and his brother built the hose bed and the seat and everything there.
Who was the brother?
That was Bill Swadley,
All
my
right.
uncle.
Okay.
Now, the 3 gentlemen standing on the left side there, the first one is our father, Rowena Clark, and is my sister, and we're the 2 left of his family. The second one is John Stubbs. He was a wonderful gentleman. He was an insurance agent here. And Jess Small, who was our first fire chief in 1917, and I married his daughter, Grace. And Mr. Small was manager of the A&P food store here. And in the seat is my cousin, Carl Swadley. These men dedicated themselves for this purpose of fire protection and helping their citizens. But this was really the 5th fire truck that the city of Grand Prairie purchased for the men. And it would pump water which would help move the water down the fire hose at 500 gallons a minute. And we really thought that was really a wonderful instrument, because the one that we had prior to this was only 350 gallons a minute.
All right, J.C., would you name your father? You said my father, but you did not give Uncle Jake's name.
J.C. Swadley Sr., and he was known in Grand Prairie as Uncle Jake. His brother, Floyd Swadley, was a well driller, and he was also a gentleman that had a thrash machine back in the days when they used to thrash grain around here. And these men, three of them worked for my father in this garage building, and everybody called him Uncle Jake. So the farmers and the people that associated with him liked him well, and he was really a citizen and a public servant for the community.
J.C., is this my fire wagon?
That is the one that I'm proud that Linda and us went to Dallas on Lamar Street and put it and placed it on a trailer, and we have it stored in a building here that was built. And Miss Jackson, just like she said, they came to J.C., we got a fire truck, go over Grand Prairie. And so we went and picked it up.
All right, are you going to tell them who the mascot of this truck is when we get it all fixed?
I'm grateful that we're going to have Ruth Jackson as the mascot of this fire truck. Let's certainly do that.
I am your new Dalmatian, aren't I?
That's right. You sure are, Ruthie.
All right, this is another picture that we'd like to show and tell. And Squad, if you'd hold that up for J.C. while we clue in on that one.
Now this is a picture on West Main Street at 2nd Street where the bank is today, and it is our third fire truck, the one that it's a real speed wagon, and the one on our left in this picture is a Model T. They bought this in 1920 from American of France people. The lumberyard is behind was on the corner now where there's a salvage building, salvage store. But this is back in 1923.
All right, we have another one, Squad, while we're into all of this show and tell. And that's the one that I really like.
Now then, this picture that we have is 1925, and those fire trucks that we are viewing are real speed wagons. The one on my left is the one that has the pump on it, and the one on the right is a hose and a chemical truck. The background that you will see is the First Baptist Church, and one Monday night in 29, this church burnt down on us, and of course it's a beautiful building there now. But this group, and that's my baby brother that was a mascot at the time, 1925, which we lost him in the South Pacific with the Air Force during WW2. On the right there is Mr. Turner, who was the mayor, and Brother Roberts, who was a chaplain and one of the commissioners.
All right, here's one more we have to show and tell,
Now,
another version.
This picture that we're viewing is from East Main Street, 218 East Main Street. This building was my father's garage and storage and filling station, and a place where you could call and tell them that your house was on fire or that you had something that you needed to help. That is my dad, our dad, standing there by his car, which was our fire chief, volunteer. He never received any money for it. And this building was built in 21, and he housed the fire trucks for the community until 49, when the city built the station on Main Street, which was our central fire station.
J.C., it now, it's finders, keepers, and some of the establishments along there, the Christmas store, some of those others in that area at this time.
Sure is.
Right.
Sure is.
We have another one now, and these are all old fire trucks, but it's in front of our fire station number 1, and I think you need to talk about that, J.C.
Yes. This picture was made from the new fire station on West Main Street. And on my right, you will notice this ladder truck that we'll talk about later. And there is an American La France chain drive. That means that the chain going to the back wheels would move this truck. And we have the Ford truck that's built, and then we have one chassis that we had made into a fire truck later on. But this was along about 49 or 50 that this picture was made.
Okay, thank you. We're going to let you rest a minute, J.C.,
All right.
and we're going to let Billy Powers show this old fire engine, because I think he has one just like it, or that may even be his.
That's
Billy, would you
Cannon.
tell us a little bit about that? This is
that's
Cannon's.
Cannon.
Okay.
You gonna tell that, Ken?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, tell us about it.
He-
Where did you get this, Mr. Squat Cannon?
All right.
Bought this from the, where you
I
got?
got a picture. You just talk about it.
Bought it from the city of Grand Prairie, and still have it stored up here in Mr. Dave Hicks's buildings. And we use it in parades, and we have Chief here will tell you about putting a 1951 Ford front end under it. But that's a 1921 American La France, number 348,
That's right.
that they built.
It sure is. May I say that Dallas called, my gentleman Dallas was the chief of the shop, called up out to Grand Prairie, and I happened to be the one that talked to him. I knew him well. And this ladder truck that you just looked at, we were grateful that Dallas was going to retire this. And they said, we've got a fire truck, it's a ladder, said, if you think if Grand Prairie could handle it, we'll be glad to sell it to you. And I said, well, how much do you want for it? And he said, $300. And man, I went to our mayor and our commissioner, and I said, oh, we can get us a ladder truck for $300. And so they said, all right. Now, this is 21 model, like Cannon's telling us. And we went to Love Field where they had it stored, and we drove it back to Grand Prairie. And if you'll notice on this truck, it has the steering wheels on the back. That's called a tiller wheel. And I had never driven anything like this before, but I drove it out of Dallas to Grand Prairie because I was so proud for Grand Prairie to have something like this to use. And we used it a lot of times for putting up the Christmas lights, didn't we, fellas?
All right, tell me, J.C., how many years did you use this after you bought it from Dallas?
From when we changed it up and put a new tractor under it, that was in '51, and we used it until '72 when Chief Langford was our chief then, and they bought this 100-foot American La France Arrow at that time. So this truck, I'd like to say this, it was grateful. We used it on the Baghdad fire. You kiddos will never know, but that was a great thing. And we went to Arlington 3 times and helped them with the fire. So we were grateful. And there's one other thing that you can always think about. You always have good friends and keep friends. The Fort Worth fire chief of the shop, they were fixing to destroy a ladder truck, and this one had solid wheels on the back, and it was a straight tractor. They gave to the city, and after I talked to them, they say I'm a moocher, but
You're a moocher, all right.
he gave us the wheels for the back. He gave us the 5th wheel that we had to have on there so we could put a tractor that it would turn. And I brought it home, and we all the volunteers, men, we worked on that, fixed it up.
That's wonderful. All right, Mr. Cannon, you're holding a little replica there. Tell us a little bit about that type of a fire engine in the past.
Well, Dallas used to have one like this, and this is a air chamber.
Air chamber.
And
a
this
steamer.
is the pump, and this is your boiler here, and that's where they got the pressure to
Turn
Pump the water.
pump.
That's
and-
steam. It's a
That is
steam
wonderful.
drill.
And is that called an old steam?
Steamer.
Then
That's steamer pump, not steam
Steamer
engine.
pump.
Sure
That's
is.
wonderful. All right, we're going to do something with show and tell in a few minutes with JC with all of the equipment we have over there. But before we do that, Mr. Powers, I would like to single you out a little bit. You are quite a historian photographically, and you've been helping us with the history of Grand Prairie in a sense of the word, and especially with the Grand Prairie High School Alumni Association, resurrecting some old pictures and things. Do you have a cataloging of much of the fire department or anything that is going to be important to Grand Prairie in this 75th year?
Well, I've had the opportunity to make negatives of all of, not all of J.C.'s photographs, but I have negatives of some of the major items in his collection, so I have those, and I think the Grand Prairie Historical Society is going to have a copy made for their files. So I have from this recent reunion we put together 175 slides, and we'll be showing those at the homecoming that's coming up October the 23rd, I believe, isn't it?
That's right. That's the magic date and time, and we're going to have it's happening in Grand Prairie. It's going to feature them on our show in just a little bit. But J.C., we're going to leave Mr. Cannon until the last to talk to the young people. What in the world do you have there with you? And since you were associated with the Fire Museum here in Grand Prairie?
Ms. Jackson, it's great to bring this to the attention of our citizens. On my right is called a hand crank siren. This was on a 1920 Model T Ford fire truck. We didn't have the electric ones like we have today. And ever who started out to the fire to help somebody, he would be driving and he would crank this to get a freeway, but after he maybe a block or so from the garage building, he'd pick up a volunteer, and that was his next position, was to crank this siren. I'm going to turn it just a little bit. That helped them to let them know that we were coming, they were coming, and to help keep the horses from running away at that time. This is electric siren. During WW2, we had a civil defense program in Grand Prairie, and this was on my father's car, which was a little Ford coupe. The boys put it on there for him. This, I'm proud to mention, Grand Prairie bought the first car for the fire department. We used that for our purposes of fire business, etc. And this siren was on this car. Now, today this siren is obsolete. This was a 6 volt it would run, but now we have 12 volts. So this is just something that we're glad that we still have from part of our service. This, I'd like to say, this is called a Dietz oil lantern. On that 1920 Model T fire truck, they had 2 of these. And this what they would use at nights to walk around and to see by when there's a fire or a disaster. This was patented in 1914, and when they had the horse-drawn equipment in the cities, at nights, let's say Dallas, they would light this kerosene lantern, and it was 2, one on each side, and in the morning they of course cleaned the glass and everything, but this was quite a fire apparatus.
Was that the only light that was on a horse-drawn carriage?
That's what it sure was, Ms. Jackson. This was the only thing that was on that pumper, which would be a steam engine, horse-drawn, on each side of the boiler. That light would be burning. Of course, don't remember the streets in those days wasn't like the streets today. They was probably a gravel streets and earth streets and everything, but this was part of their deal, and this is called a chimney, and they would clean that chimney every morning. This I like to, for those to know, this shiny nozzle was a chemical hose nozzle. On that Model T, it had a tank that held 40 gallons of water, and this tank, to use it, it had a chemical in there that would dispel the water through the hose, and this is the type that's used. I like to say this little container here is a extinguisher that was a foam extinguisher. We had 3 gallons of chemical in this, and we used it on gasoline fires at those days. Now this is back in the 20s. It would make us about 12 or 15 gallons of foam out on that fire that we'll be trying to extinguish. But this is some of the wonderful things. This is called a shut-off nozzle we used on the end of our play pipes that in using a stream of water. But these go back to the 20s and the 50s. Thank you.
All
Ms.
right,
Jackson.
now, JC, I'm not through with you yet, young man. You've had your show and tell. Now, I want you to look out into your camera, and we want to find out about really a lot about J.C. Swadley Jr. Now,
Thank
where
you.
were you born, young man?
Ms. Jackson, I was born, I always say, on Main Street, but my dad had a residence about where there's this place that's on the south side of Main Street. I believe they have renting equipment and everything. Used to be residents in there. So I was born on Main Street, just about a block from my daddy's building in business.
Kind of catty-cornered across the street southeast, right?
That's sure right.
All right,
It
now
sure
you'll
was.
need to name your mother.
My mother was Letty Smith Swadley, and her sisters came to Grand Prairie with Miss Grimes, who was my grandmother, and their mother. She of course remarried, but she was a Smith. And my mother was a wonderful worker in the community. I would like to give them credit. Back in WW1, they used to make bandages, and they used to sew for the soldiers to send over. And she had a brother in World War I that he passed away from the cause of that.
All right, JC, I want you to tell me, I know that you grew up in the fire department work
Yes.
with your dad, but when did you actually go to work for the city of Grand Prairie as a paid fireman?
In January the 1st, 1945, they asked me if I would come to work, and this is Mr. Turner. And may I say, my salary was $125 a month, and we had an apartment upstairs over my dad's building that he built for that. And I didn't have nobody to help me. In other words, I could call them in, but I was the only one at that time.
When did you retire?
I retired in '61, and I had 30 years at that time. We had a police chief, and Six Flags Over America, or Six Flags
Over Texas.
over Texas was being built. And our police chief was asked to come up there and set up security, and my police chief asked JC to come up there and be a fire chief. And I went up there when they started opened up in '62 and stayed until '75, and I had a wonderful tour up there.
And you're still doing good stuff, but we're going to let you rest a minute. We have about a half minute left. Mr. Cannon, would you look out into your camera and encourage all of the young people to be a fireman in 1/2 minute?
I certainly recommend being a fireman if you like to help people and save lives and protect property. Not the best paying job in the world, but it sure is rewarding.
This is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do, and we want to thank you for helping us celebrate the 75th birthday of the fire department in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Thank you.